안녕하십니까 블록미디어 시청자 여러분. 오늘은 KBW에 나와 있는데요. 이번에는 도메인을 혁신하려는 D3의 프레드님과 인터뷰를 진행해 보도록 하겠습니다. D3는 도마 프로토콜을 발견하고 있는데요. 천천히 알아보도록 하겠습니다. So hello Fred, could you explain about yourself and maybe D3 and Doma Protocol?
Yeah, my name is Fred Chu, CEO co-founder of D3. We are launching the Doma Protocol. I've been in the domain industry for about 25 years. So I've managed about 40 million, mostly .coms, traded millions of domain names over time. I bought and sold a lot of domains as well, marquee .coms and some AIs. And for the first time ever, these asset classes are going to be tokenized on chain through us.
Okay, so could you explain why you started the domain business and the background behind finding Doma Protocol into the crypto area?
Yeah, domains are a really interesting asset class. They're like owning buildings, for example, in Gangnam, right? They're the OG internet real estate. So they're very valuable. Some are more valuable than others. The reason why we created this company and also bootstrapped this protocol is because it's very, very hard to buy, trade, close, transact like a good domain name. Like we've all been there. It's been hard to find one for your project or for your company or even just one to collect. They only take fiat. Sometimes it takes weeks to close, right? And you're oftentimes dealing with paperwork, legal paperwork. Now, what if that can also actually be brought on chain just to speed up and improve the experience for everybody?
That's a good idea. So how the domain industry is evolving to a 350 RWA asset.
And domain names have been around for like 35 or 40 years, right? Everything from Amazon.com, which was created in the 90s, all the way to like software.ai, which is a domain name even not like IO, right? This stuff works like on the internet, works in your browser. It powers 5 billion people can access this stuff through browser, through email, right? You can even do things now with AI and wallet use cases. These things fundamentally have a lot of value because it's built-in utility. It's always been that way. So DNS domain names is very, very unique. And it's been also the first digitally native asset class. So it just makes a ton of sense to bring it to kind of Web3 and blockchain.
So could you explain more about the concept of DomainFi?
Yeah.
And how the D3 Doma enables DomainFi by bringing internet domains on chain?
And DomainFi is basically DeFi for domains. So if you own a valuable property, whether it's a chat.com or like insurance.com, they're sold for millions of dollars, by the way. It's no different than owning like a valuable building, right? You can maybe lease it. You can create, you can lease to own contract. You can borrow against it. If you're a bank, you can lend against it. So a lot of these like DeFi concepts that are really prevalent within Web3 can now come to this very, very old school traditional asset class that has none of that, right? So it made a lot of sense to build DomainFi on top of course, a brand new chain, Doma, because it's built-in compliance. You know, domain names as an asset class does have a regulatory environment. So a lot of the native features about a domain name just have to be built in the way that you conduct transactions and utilize this domain name. So that's why it has to be done sort of on a specialized chain, and that's what Doma is.
There's a regulation stuff about domain. So how do you think you can bring it onto like the IPN?
Yeah, the biggest one with domain names is you cannot cyber squat. For example, if you wanted to register like Amazon.crypto or Amazon.ai, instantaneously, ICANN, which is the regulatory body of this internet asset class, ICANN is for Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. They'll immediately like ban that acquisition and transfer it into an account that is actually owned by Amazon. So it has to so there's a long established like trade, intellectual property, anti-squatting, like procedures that can't happen on a completely permissionless web. It has to sort of be in a permission environment.
Okay. So beyond financialization, what is the reason behind like bringing global domain assets on chain? And what long-term benefits do you believe that this shift will bring?
You know, one obvious thing is buying a piece of your favorite domain name, like chat.com, or maybe even like hockey.com. Traditionally, you'd have to actually have to buy the whole domain, right? These days with Doma and fractionalization, you can actually buy little pieces of it. Maybe like one fungible token representation of chat.com or hockey.com out of like 100 million supply. And when you buy one, there's going to be utility built from day one. Like for example, you'd be able to get like Tony.chat.com or Fred.chat along with your token. So these things have been utility since day one. All we're doing is trying to allow for the masses to get access to this asset class through buying a token of this domain.
So I'm not sure that if you guys may be generating a token or like making tokens, but you think maybe if you guys make a token, your token will be used in that buying that domain or lending the domain.
Yeah, basically buying a token of like hockey.com or buying a token of Software AI is actually buying an ERC20 fungible token. It's not an NFT. So if you buy maybe 1% or even 50% or even 100% of this supply, you'll get embedded rights. You can control the domain. You may be able to get like a subdomain. You can use it for your website. You can use it for a wallet address. You can use it for email, right? So for the first time, you're actually able to really like buy a piece of the internet. And because it's fundamentally like an ERC20 token, you can also trade the internet. So buy and trade the internet. That's kind of our vision.
So you mean that those kind of stuffs will be made by the D3 token or something?
So think about Doma and all these domains that come online, including a lot of these premium and ultra premium names. Each one of those will be like a launchpad through our new launchpad, Mizu, that we just launched and announced yesterday. So there'll be a lot of launches of a bunch of new tokens, basically, of these domain names, right? So there's going to be a ton of these supply coming out. And if you really understand this asset class, the difference between this and an NFT, for example, or between this and like a wallet address, then you could probably tell your friends, and they also may want to own a piece of these through a fungible token. You can't. But there'll be a lot of tokens to answer your question coming out of this launchpad on this chain.
Could you explain more about DeFi launchpad maybe? Because I think not many Korean users know.
Yes, it's no different than going back to the building concept in Gundam. If you wanted to buy like a building on this block, maybe buy a building on that block, or like 2 blocks away, or whatever. So the first time you can now buy a piece of that building through a fungible token, you can buy as little bit as you want or as much as you want. And whatever you buy will confer you some benefit, right? Now, in the real estate sense, sure, maybe it's like you get to use like an office space, or maybe you get to like visit, or maybe you can rent some stay for like your personal or your business. It's no different than internet real estate, right? If you use a subdomain, you can use the domain, you can actually get benefits and utility from day one when you buy a piece of that domain or building in this case. So I like to come back to the real estate analogy as often as I can.
Okay. So I think a lot of Korean users these days are interested in like seeking the mainnet. So could you share your plans for the maybe what people can do on mainnet or maybe mainnet person?
Yeah, Doma mainnet. Yeah. Doma mainnet is basically built for DomainFi. So like I said, if you own a domain name, you want to maybe borrow against your domain name. You want to sell maybe like 100 million fractions of your domain name. You want to tap into an ecosystem of app developers who are also building on top of your asset class. You know, whether they're maybe like escrow companies or NFT marketplaces or registrars, right? We created Doma to basically provide liquidity and composability to you as a domain owner or you as an end user who wants to buy a piece of that domain or buy a piece of that internet. So everything having to do with this asset class that I know, that I have experience around, this DNS compliant asset class will be enabled through Doma. DNS hosting, website hosting, email access, wallet mapping, right? You name it. Subdomains, you name it.
So when I tried to test it, I was curious, like there are only a small portion of domains that I could .vic or .doji or .shiba. Are you planning to like expand more like domain names for your maybe testing or mainnet?
Yeah, our company is probably the top Web3 kind of domain company for all the top ecosystems like Solana. We'll be launching .sol and .solana. Like Avalanche, we're launching .avalanche on behalf of Avalabs, right? Sui, right? And others. So Near, for .near, anime, right? For anime project. So that land is coming out next year. April 2026 is when the ICANN applications are due for these new extensions. And sometime after that is when these extensions will be delegated. So if you bought like a Tony.ape or something, or Fred.ape, you bought it right now as an NFT, it's like a pre-sales NFT, right? It doesn't have a dot, it has a star, you may remember, right? So that NFT will actually give you the right to buy and to claim the future real, Fred.ape or Tony.ape.
So since a lot of Korean people also do that, so could you share maybe D3's vision for the Korean people maybe?
Yeah, our vision is basically to bring this entire $350 billion asset class, which is domain names, like the whole domain asset class on chain, right? Once you bring it on chain, then you can start unlocking, trillions of dollars worth of value, right? From, like what I said, DomainFi activity, borrowing, lending, leasing, lease to own, right? Fractionalization, right? It's only the beginning. So we really want to expand this industry by 5 or 6x at least through just more efficiency, right? Forget about technology for a second. It just makes a lot more sense to kind of bring homes or real estate on into the digital age as opposed to being stuck in kind of like the Stone Age.
I think a lot of people in Korea are very interested into real estate, and you guys are like building the on-chain real estate, I think. So could you say anything for the Korean user, Korean market, or the Korean investors?
I mean, you're absolutely right. It's Doma is essentially the online real estate blockchain, right? So if you ever wanted to buy a piece of premium real estate, or maybe you couldn't maybe access that, or whether it's an offline real estate or premium online real estate like chat.com, for the first time ever, you will be able to buy even a small piece, like $1 or like $5 piece of that favorite online internet real estate through Doma.
Thank you so much for today's interview. 오늘 도마의 파운더인 프레드를 만나보았는데요. 온체인의 부동산을 꿈꾸는 도마 프로토콜 어떠셨나요? 네, 이상으로 오늘 인터뷰를 마치도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.